Building a long and prosperous career in the NFL isn't easy, and I can understand the temptation of wanting to keep playing when you're so close to achieving certain milestones or records in your career. But you gotta know when to call it quits. And a little spoiler, if you've been retired for 10 years, it's really too late to come back to the gridiron. Obviously, NFL stars possessed otherworldly athleticism. There's no denying that. But there are a lot of great athletes out there, and if you want to make it to the professional ranks, it takes a special sort of competitive nature. Unfortunately for some of the league's aging stars, the same competitive fire that got them there ends up keeping them around for way too long, as they try to desperately hang on to their glory days. Or even worse, sometimes that spirit takes hold after they've retired and it gets them up off the couch and ready to give it another go. We have seen some impressive returns to form, most recently from Rams safety Eric Waddle and Buccaneers tight end Rob Gronkowski. But more often than not, these unretirements are a huge mistake. So today, let's take a look at 10 NFL players who really should have left well enough alone and stayed retired. Jason Witten, the longtime Cowboys tight end, is one of the more recent and most obvious cases of a guy who really should have left his spikes hanging up in the foyer. Which is sad to say, because Witten was one of the most consistent performers across the league for nearly a decade and a half after Dallas took him in the third round of the 2003 NFL Draft. At the time of his retirement, his resume seemed complete. Witten was an 11-time Pro Bowler with franchise records of 1,152 catches and 12,448 yards. A Super Bowl would have been nice, but he played for the Cowboys his whole career, so really, that was never going to happen. Witten then stepped directly into the Monday Night Football booth, which, well, went as poorly as the whole staying retired thing. The robotic consistency he showed on the gridiron, well, that didn't exactly translate well into the press box, and the fans had a field day mocking him week in and week out. Something I mentioned because perhaps that played a role in his decision to get out of retirement and rejoin the Cowboys the following year. He said it was because he felt Dallas had a chance to win the Super Bowl in 2019, which, hey, that wasn't entirely wrong, but still, you have to think he was chasing a palate cleanser after his disastrous broadcasting stint. To his credit, he played all 16 games, which is pretty impressive at his advanced age. But he was clearly a shell of himself. And what made his unretirement even more sad was his final year in 2020, when he played one middling season with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Witten isn't the only Cowboys legend to struggle coming to grips with retirement. Charles Haley and Deion Sanders, two key contributors during the Dallas' dynasty years in the 90s, made very similar decisions, and with varying levels of success. Starting with Haley, who is actually a Cowboy at the time of his retirement. The edge rusher built a reputation for himself across the league for not only being one of the most fearsome pass rushers in the game, but also a borderline insane person, which I suppose made him all the more fearsome. During the early years of his career in San Francisco, his erratic ways caused a rift between Haley and his coaches and teammates, and subsequently landed him in Dallas after a fight with Niners coach George Seifert bubbled over and management decided enough was enough. In Dallas, Haley kept his reputation in both regards, dominating on the field and causing mayhem off of it. Like when he made headlines after smashing his head through a concrete locker room wall after a home loss to the Bills. Yeah, just sounds like a real joy of a guy to be around. Anyhow, Haley did ultimately achieve his goal and helped the Cowboys to 3 Super Bowl wins, giving him 5 total for his entire career. Now, unfortunately, his rugged play style and high-flying life off the field caused his body to ail. Between a nagging back and an illness in the family, Haley retired at the conclusion of the 1996 season. Haley was eventually coerced by his former team, the 49ers, to come out of retirement during the 1998 season to bolster their injury-plagued defensive line for a playoff run. After a decent performance, the Niners brought him back for the 99 season, in which he tailed 3 sacks. It's great that this final push got Haley over the 100-sack milestone, but considering the state of his body and likely his mind, when he retired the first time, well, there was no reason for him to risk it. Sanders, on the other hand, retired for 3 seasons. 1 year after he left the Cowboys to sign a lucrative deal with the then Washington Redskins. He did it ahead of his 34-year-old season and had to forfeit a sizable portion of the $8 million signing bonus that he took to join Washington. Perhaps Sanders' massive ego was bruised during his lone season in Washington when opposing teams repeatedly threw at him rather than at second-year corner Champ Bailey. He also had a minor rift with head coach Marty Schottenheimer because he felt that Schottenheimer didn't include him in the discussion when defensive coordinator Ray Rhodes was pushed out of the organization. Either way, between his declining play and advanced age, most assumed prime time was done. Off to tackle some other ventures, whether it be business-wise or athletically, which in some part was true. But he ultimately unretired a rather shocking 3 years later to join the Baltimore Ravens for the 2004 and 2005 seasons, making him one of the oldest cornerbacks to ever play in the NFL. And if you think 3 years is a long time off, only to get up one morning and decide you can still play in the NFL, well, let me introduce you to journeyman quarterback Steve DeBerg. After 5 stops across 16 seasons, DeBerg stepped away from football at the conclusion of the 1993 season. DeBerg was 44 when he reemerged, joining the Atlanta Falcons as a backup QB. During his one outing, a 28-3 loss, he completed just 9 of 20 attempts for 117 yards and an interception before getting the hook. The Falcons did make it to the Super Bowl that year, but they ended up losing to Denver. And DeBerg didn't even touch the field. So tell me, Steve, was it worth it? Anyway, back to Dion. After Baltimore signed him to play nickelback on a stout Ravens defense, Sanders said, "I prepare to win. I prepare to dominate. I prepare to conquer. I prepare to win it all. And that's one of the reasons I'm here." And while he may have been preparing to do all those things, it's not exactly what he did. The man who once seemed immortal proved to be quite otherwise. And while his play was passable, his days as primetime were clearly behind him. Most will give him a pass on the performance because he was 37 and 38 during his stint in Baltimore. But if you ask me, he should have stayed retired and let his prime days live on in NFL fans' memories. This is largely similar to the sentiment around another Hall of Famer's brief stint of coming out of retirement, Reggie White. During his prime, White was truly one of the greatest players to ever lace him up. He racked up 13 Pro Bowls and 8 All-Pros as a member of first the Philadelphia Eagles, then the Green Bay Packers, even doing so in his last year before retirement in 1998. But when you take a year off at age 38, well, coming back ain't so easy. And that really showed during his victory lap with the Carolina Panthers in 2000. The defensive end did record 5.5 sacks, but the team was pretty bad, and he clearly was not the superstar he'd been throughout his entire career. And it'll always be weird to see the pictures of him in the Carolina Blue after all those great years in Philly and Green Bay. Honestly, it just feels wrong. Kinda like this generation of fans probably felt watching Marshawn Lynch come out of retirement to play in the Raiders silver and black, or Randy Moss donning a San Francisco 49ers uni. It wasn't just the fact that both guys looked weird in those random unis after so many epic moments in their prime, but it was also that the players we watched torture opposing defenses, both in their own unique ways, were just shadows of their former selves. During Moss's last NFL stop in Tennessee, he caught 40 balls for 434, which is nice, I guess. But there's a reason that there's an entire segment called Mossed that showed receivers making beastly catches over defensive backs. Because there was a time when that was all Randy did. That is, until he made the mistake of coming out of retirement. With Lynch, it was more of the same. 2 years with the Raiders, then 1 back with the Seahawks. He played 22 games, his usage and production went down more and more each year until he retired. Both would have been wise to have stayed on the couch. After all, they were iconic players of their generation. No one wants to see those kinds of players fade out like that. This isn't just a new wave phenomenon though. Bond, a linebacker who played his heyday with the Eagles and Rams, retired in 1970 and came back in 1974 to join Washington at the age of 36. For those of you who don't know, Bond was actually a highly decorated player during his prime. He won a championship in 1960 and made 7 All-Pro teams. And he parlayed that success into a coaching gig in the college ranks at the end of the 1970 season, which was part of why he came out of retirement. Because George Allen, his former head coach, offered him an opportunity to be a player coach with Washington. Bohan played just 2 games and didn't record a single tackle, which leads me to wonder if he maybe should have just stayed retired as a player and just have joined on as a coach. And last but certainly not least, we have perhaps the most famous or infamous unretirer in recent history. Green Bay Packers legend Brett Favre. The gunslinging QB from Mississippi was one of the most popular players in the league during his prime. He played the game with childlike excitement and was one of the best quarterbacks of his generation. Favre captured 3 MVP trophies, 6 All-Pros, 11 Pro Bowls, and 1 Lombardi trophy, setting a bevy of records along the way. But for all the majesty that his career was, there is still a shadow that hangs over it. And that is the mayhem that ensued during the curtain call turned encore that was his twilight years. Some of our younger fans may not realize it, but Favre's retirement saga, which really picked up steam in 2007, actually started all the way back in 2002, when he made the following comments to Sports Illustrated's Peter King. "I think about retirement a heck of a lot more than I used to. I miss home. I know it's nuts, but GM/head coach Mike Sherman told us today that he was giving us Saturday and Sunday off this week, and the guys were all excited. All I could think was, I wish I could be on my lawnmower back home." From then on, his retirement became an ongoing talking point, in part because he continued to run his mouth. Like in his post-game interview following the last game of the 06 season when he got choked up talking to Andrea Kramer and said, "If today's my last game, I want to remember it." Of course, the offseason came, and Brett changed his tune, then came back for the 2007 season. The rumors continued through until March of 2008, where he finally decided enough was enough and issued an official retirement statement, which lasted until June. Green Bay, however, had a young Aaron Rodgers waiting in the wings, and they had enough of Brett's back and forth, and the two sides eventually negotiated Favre's release. Brett went on to play 3 more seasons, 1 with the New York Jets and 2 with Green Bay's hated rival, the Minnesota Vikings, which really ticked off the Packers diehards in a big way. I doubt 1 good year and an NFC title game appearance was worth all the damage he did to his relationship with the Packers fans, his body, and his legacy during his final act. But on the flip side, which currently retired NFL player would you love to see make a comeback? Join us in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.